I'm Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on June 6th, 2014. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talents of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during the program, we do have a live chat room available for you. And if you are listening to the recorded version, you can email those to us after the program, coaching@gallup.com, and we would love to have you log into chat. It does take just about any social account that you have: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, anything like that, Yahoo. Get logged in. That way we can reference your questions when you ask them. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center. That's just gallupstrengthscenter.com for all your coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video to both streaming or downloadable audio for offline listening to past shows, and we've got a bunch of them now. You might want to head over to coaching.gallup.com. If you like the video, just click on the YouTube link there when you're on the coaching site, and that will get you all the videos we have. We will be live tweeting during the program as well, and I'll be monitoring that. So if you want to use hashtag CSFchat, that's just hashtag CSFchat on Twitter, and I will be tracking that as well. Jeremy Petrosini is our host today. He is a learning and development consultant with Gallup here on the riverfront, although he's not on the riverfront today. Jeremy, welcome from an airport somewhere in the United States.
Minneapolis, I think. I think that's where I landed. So, anyways, yeah, good to be here, Jim. Thank you guys again so much for joining. If you're a regular listener, again, thanks for being back and continuing to build out this library of coaches. It's fun to hear so many different stories, dynamics, tips and tricks, and just those components that continue to educate us as coaches. And for those of you who are new, one of the things that we hit on a lot is with the Strengthsfinder assessment, we know that change really happens, not just from somebody discovering their top 5, but when they have the opportunity to have a conversation around it, when they can really sit with a strengths coach who can help them make some of those discoveries and really kind of move it from just kind of knowing to doing something with it, to using it in a productive way that really transforms their own performance, but also the organization that they work for. And in our efforts to reach 1 billion people with strengths, we just crossed, a few months back, crossed the 10 million mark, but it's our goal to hit 1 billion. We know that in order to do that, we want to equip and partner with 1 million coaches like yourselves out there. So we're excited to have this webcast today to just kind of educate you and let us hear from one of those coaches. So without further ado, Lisa Peterson is our guest that we have with us today. Lisa, thanks for being here.
Looks like we lost Jeremy.
I'm back. Yeah. I'm glad to be here. Jeremy froze a little bit, or?
Yeah, I did. Am I back?
Yeah, no, you're back. Just do that intro again because we missed a little bit of it.
We missed it. Lisa, I'm glad you're glad to be here. Thank you. We'll start there, right? But Lisa Peterson is a full-time consultant for Gallup. Works as an organizational consultant. Really, one of our subject matter experts, specialist with a lot of our kind of more senior accounts. We were able to kind of coerce her to become Gallup full-time, but she's really been kind of a partner of Gallup for over 30 years. Spent 30 years with Stryker, who is a great Gallup client, is going to be able to share some of those stories today where she served as an executive coach and head of leadership development, really kind of helped drive a lot of the cultural components of both strengths, engagement, helping the organization select the right people. So Lisa's got a lot of experience she's going to be able to share with that. And then she actually spent some time, too, as an independent consultant and coach. And Lisa, I know that's when you and I first met, right as we were launching this whole idea of, hey, what if we partnered with external coaches? Before we did that, we wanted to pull some people together, and you were, I think, one of those 10 that were able to come in and share your thoughts and ideas. So thanks for doing that. I know many people out there today are grateful that you were able to come in and approve what we were doing with the strengths coaching components. So thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm so excited. It's sort of amazing to have seen the growth and acceptance and just absolute joyous embracing of the strengths revolution since Gallup really introduced the world to the Strengthsfinder, and certainly my experience from Stryker, goes back around Strengthsfinder probably close to 15 years now. I think since 2000. So amazing revolution for individuals and for organizations.
Yeah, and let's do this, Lisa. I know you've got great stories of individual coaching, again, from your time that you spent independent, but also kind of just those components of really what you're going to help make happen within Stryker. I know that question comes up a lot with now even small, medium-sized businesses, but also large businesses, of just how do we make this part of our culture. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit just of what was your personal journey with Strengths, but also then the Stryker journey. Like, how did you really help kind of fuel the flame there to make it part of the DNA that it is today?
So, of course, I had the great fortune to be able to come to Strengths through my work at Stryker. And at the time that I was introduced to Strengthsfinder, I was actually the Vice President of Human Resources for one of their largest operating groups. And we had already, as an organization, embraced for many years at that point talent-based selection. And really believed in studying our best, understanding the talents of the best people, and seeking to hire people more like your best as a way of really driving your business forward. So when the Strengthsfinder was introduced, we were kind of early adopters. It just made so much sense to us that once you've got this incredibly talented person on board, let's now figure out how to make them their most effective, how to ensure they hit the ground running, and then how to really build powerful teams, powerful collaborations between individuals on teams, and then how to really help managers be great managers to really maximize the strengths of the individuals on their teams. And that was really, in many ways, the focus out of the gate around Stryker. And in classic sort of Stryker fashion, we threw our arms around it. I think many of the other people that have been on Call to Coach have talked about some great stories in really helping individuals gain super awareness, really claim and own the strengths that are under their hood, and a lot of great coaching focus at that. And of course, we started there as well. But I think because the organization was so already believing, drinking the strong Kool-Aid around talent, because it proved out so much in our business, that we moved very quickly to figure out how we could take strengths and drive them into all the other kind of human capital work streams in the business. And one of the areas really out of the gate was really looking at how to help individuals collaborate with each other. And I don't know if we've talked much on Call to Coach about this tremendous book. I just think it's like the seminal story about collaboration. It's that, can I hold it up? I love this. This Power of Two. Because I think it's such an incredibly helpful philosophy about getting individuals in your workplace to understand their strengths and then to build collaborative partnerships with the individuals that they work with. And as our organizations get increasingly complex, it's not just the person next to you that you work with on the production floor or the person in the cubicle next to you. It's people in other organizations that you have to work with that are the beginning or the end of the process that you work on. It's sales reps collaborating with people at their in the OR that they're selling to or supporting. It's people in one country helping employees in another country or working on projects. So we spent a fair amount of time looking at how can we employ strengths to help people make the best collaborative partnerships and relationships, and really reflected that in a lot of the training that we did as well, where a lot of the work in the training workshops were having two people work together in couplets, really understanding, what do you need from me to be successful? How do my strengths help you? What do I have that you don't have? And making sure that those complementary collaborations are occurring.
And Lisa, were most of the pairings, were they people in the same role? Were they people in different roles? And I'm asking this because I want you to help us, for the listeners out there, to again differentiate that there are talent-based selection tools, or in some cases we'll even refer to those as strength-based selection tools, that say yes, right? We're saying these two people are great managers, but when you look at their Strengthsfinder results, they can have a very different set of top 5 signature themes, right? So I always say that the assessment told us, can they do the job? In this case, can they be managers? Yes. But how do they do it is very different. I actually had the chance last week to be with a bunch of Stryker sales reps.
Mm-hmm.
Can they all do the job? Yes. And it's proven, because we don't train them unless they've proven that they're successful, right?
Right.
But how they do it, very different set of themes with the individuals I was talking to. So talk about that a little bit with just that piece, and were these people in the same role or different roles? And
yeah. So, I mean, the sales reps are always a very interesting discussion, because, you know, many organizations think that there's one model of a person that can go out and be successful, and at Stryker, as in many companies, for instance, you can have people with really hard driving things, competition themes, and themes activating, and really, you know, things that push people, that create a lot of resilience, that want to win, and that oftentimes is a really great set of strengths for sales achievement. But what we found is there are other people that win in sales that do it from a different place. They do it more from having a strong mission about helping their customer, or they do it from themes that ensure that they want to be the best, they want to be highly responsible and dependable and deliver the best service to their customer. And I could probably go on and on. There's lots of different ways to get to that great sales achievement. And I think having sales managers come in and understand that, it really allows them to know how to work with and lever the greatest success of those reps. And if the sales manager themselves is one style, if they're a highly competitive, it's all about winning, you know, kind of thing, it's about beating the guy next to me, they may have a hard time understanding the motivations and of the other kind of sales rep, and may not be able to make a great connection.
Yeah, so, that manager might be woo competition, right? I want to win, and I'm going to go out and network as much as I can. But that rep might be analytical relator, which is somebody I was talking to this last week, and they said, I love to study the business issues, and I'm going to connect with the top 3 people in the hospital. But he said, when I know their business better than they do, why would they buy from anybody else? Because nobody, but he used his analytical to do it. He's like, I don't want to go to the party and meet everybody. I don't need to. He's like, I just need to be the smartest person in the room when I connect with that doctor, that chief nurse, you know, officer.
Exactly.
That's an example there of strengths kind of being individualized in the way you guys use them at Stryker to do that. So. Yes,
and I think that the power of that is observed in many aspects of the day-to-day life cycle of employees and how managers interact with employees. So again, just very powerful tool for sort of getting people, for understanding the wide diversity of people. There's another element where strengths was very, very powerful, was as managers trying to put together and operate diverse teams, really being able to understand, respect the different kinds of approaches that people had to helping the team, you know, drive to results and win together. And that was really an eye-opener for managers around sort of respecting diversity and its power.
Yeah, that sense of how do we value and appreciate everybody, you know, for the unique pieces they bring. So
absolutely.
Talk a little bit more about the collaboration piece. I love, and I know you referenced the power to, obviously one of the key things we talk about in that is when you have strong partnerships, you know, one of the core components to that is, you know, kind of that sense of complementary strengths, right? Yes. So it doesn't mean that we both have the same set of signature themes, but how do we complement each other? How do we work alongside each other to become really a power of two, right? So talk about that from how you guys leverage strengths in that perspective to really, strengthen teams, and specifically here with partnerships.
So we particularly like to use strengths to develop small working teams. And it could be project teams that we're working on, let's say, a process improvement issue, or it could be teams that were brought together very rapidly to deal with some kind of an emergent issue. And in both cases, they probably require different things. Certain kinds of teams need to gel fast, and they need to be hitting targets very, very quickly. They may not have the luxury of as much kind of analysis or data gathering and sort of, kind of deep solution development. Other kinds of teams really need, who are going to be together for a longer period and want, really robust output, may have the luxury of more time to really do the analysis, bring in data, think about what-if solutions, and those are really different kinds of strengths. And so we would look at fitting, we kind of was a fit triad, looking when you're composing a team, look at the strengths of the individuals that are kind of identified as potential players for this team event, and really figure out how to match it up, looking at the strengths that are going to work with the manager that we've named, particularly if it has to gel fast and move like the wind. And then make sure that we have the right complement of synergistic themes. So if we're going to be doing, let's make sure we get somebody analytical and deliberative on that team. If we're going to have to, gather and analyze a lot of different data to really kind of drive a plan. But we need to make sure that somebody's, tracking everything and reporting it. So, let's make sure we bring in somebody with discipline and communication themes to really kind of, get that piece going. And let's also look at how are those two going to work together. Will they be able to connect and move this thing forward? So we had a lot of ability. We applied that Strengthsfinders to those kinds of team composition issues quite a bit.
So you guys, from an HR OD perspective, were able to kind of look at that, help recommend, strategize from a strengths perspective. How did you help those individuals? And maybe this is kind of where the coaches out there I know love kind of the tips and tricks, right? How do we make it work or make it stick?
Yeah.
How did you help the individuals to know that, right? So it's like, how did they know that my job on this team, or where I bring the most value, is my analytical, and I know that, and my team members know that. But how did you guys get to that point where people had clarity more than they did frustration around what they each brought?
Yeah, well, the coaching and facilitation is the most powerful part around the use of the Strengthsfinder. I mean, it's powerful. It's powerful just itself, of course, but really understanding the nuance of how themes work together. And also how they can be seen and perceived by other people. I know some of the other Call to Coach has talked about, basements and balconies, and what happens when you have themes in excess, and, what are sort of the kind of the myths and perceptions around themes. So part of the dialogue that some of our strengths performance coaches and our HR business partners and many of our managers had as they were producing teams was sitting down with each of the members individually and saying, listen, this is the role I need you to play on this team. This is, where I need you to focus. Please make sure that you're applying, or help me understand, which of your top strengths you can bring out to deliver this. Oh, and by the way, let's talk a little bit about how the team leader works and what their dominant strengths are, and what you can pull out of your strengths bag to hit that and make that really productive fast. So there's a lot of dialogue about helping people understand which of their strengths are dominant strengths, and then also which of their situational strengths could be pulled out to apply to this particular situation or need.
Yeah, no, that's good. I know Jim was saying there's some great questions on this specific piece, right? Because it's always something that comes up. I think I even referenced on one of our last calls that I was coaching a CEO who said, Jeremy, can you check the research? Adaptability, is that really a strength? Like, he's like, and it was 34 for him, right? He once we looked at where it was for him, he's like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the other interesting component is his chief operating officer. So he was the CEO. His chief operating officer, his right hand, person in everything that he does day in day out, had adaptability number 1. And so for him, he's like, it drives me crazy. And then we talked about, are there ever components in the bank where, things are going out of control and he doesn't get razzled? He goes, yeah, every day. And I'm like, so is that a good thing? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, send him a note, right? Send him a note right now. Tell him, But talk about when you've seen, when you would see kind of themes that maybe don't tend to mesh as well. Mm-hmm. How did you coach people through that? How did you, a scenario like I just described, how did you, as you said, the coaching that you did with them and then the team facilitation or the partnership facilitation has really helped get them to own it and live it out? But give us an example maybe of where you saw two strengths that kind of clashed a bit and you guys were able to help them really become synergistic versus counterintuitive.
Yeah. I think a great example, and this played out a lot in the striker environment, we had actually, one of the tips or tricks I would say is we had actually done an analysis of all of the Strengthsfinder themes across the business. We ran thousands of people through Strengthsfinder because every new hire got it. After we implemented it, every employee over time was, completed a Strengthsfinder. So we were able to kind of get a composite profile of really what were the driving themes, the most common prevalent themes. And when you have a culture that they're, the top couple of themes are like, they're all sort of achiever, activator, relator, and then you have people that are on teams where they're really outnumbered, and some of their themes are things like adaptability, or low themes, or themes where we had very little of it at Stryker, were things like includer, empathy, harmony, and so what you have is this, really difficult wall when you're in a meeting, let's say, and you're that person that is not in the dominant theme area. You get talked over. Your point of view never comes out. If you're deliberative, let's say, you're still trying to work through the question and assemble kind of your data and your facts, or if you're analytical, and the conversation's already moved on because people are pushing for answers. They want to move through, they want to get answers. That's the dominant strength. So part of that work was sitting down with individuals and saying, let's talk about who's on the team, what happens in meetings, and with the manager, and saying, are you guiding that meeting to make sure that some of the other viewpoints that are getting lost and talked over, that they're coming out? How do you do that? How do you ensure that the fast-moving people in that discussion slow down and let the other person weigh in? They don't take all the airtime. So it's the awareness piece. When you're a dominant theme and a dominant theme culture, you don't see it. You don't see it. So it's pointing it out and making you action on it.
Yeah, that's great, because I think you're right. It's awareness and kind of ownership, right, from both the individual, but also I like the piece where you were saying too, is it the leader in the room or somebody else that's saying, hey, wait a minute, I know you're thinking about this, Lisa. We haven't heard much from you. Share your deliberatives kind of at work. What are you thinking, or what questions do you have? Yeah. Kurt Leesveld always talks about this too, and even you mentioned activator and deliberative. You know this, but Kurt is one of our coaches. Kind of, I always say he's the closest thing we have to a living Don Clifton walking the halls around here. But he always says if activators like the gas pedal of a car, deliberatives more like the brake. He doesn't want to drive a car that has just one or the other, right?
That's a good point.
So it's like this idea that we need both, and to tap the brake sometimes and go, hey, is there traffic coming before we go through this intersection? When you view it that way and say, all right, I'm all gas, but you're the brake. How do we say, let me give you permission to kind of speak up and interject with that? So I
Yes,
love the
and
way you're saying that.
I actually have another example I'd like to
Yeah.
talk to. It was actually a woman executive that I was coaching. This actually was not with Stryker. It was when I was in my individual coaching business. And she was a CEO succession candidate for a fairly large company who was a technical expert in her field. And this woman leader was incredibly powerful when she was presenting externally to congressional panels, to industry panels, providing information in her content expertise area. She was renowned in her field, and she her top 5 themes were like deliberative, analytical, intellectual, intellection, learner. She actually no relationship themes in her top 5.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of strategic thinking was there too. Inside the company, when she was with her executive team, who were all basically folks from the commercial side, and these were like competition and achiever and just not a lot of intellection themes, not a lot of themes that are like slowing down to think of plans or, you know, what if, this kind of stuff. So you could see the clash there, but she was really surrounded by them. So she came off in those executive meetings like a completely different person. She was timid. She was unable to get into the conversation. It was sort of almost like 2 completely different people. And through the coaching, you know, we were able to sort of establish a way for her to pre-sell her ideas one by one before she got into these kinds of team meetings, so that the other people around her could understand and respect what she brought to the picture and how important her thinking was to better solutions and answers. And once she was able to do that one-to-one, they began to let her in these conversations. She didn't have to try so hard to get in and stake out a position. So it was making everybody around her aware of what she brought to the picture and then having them protect it in these group meetings.
Yeah, and again, such a great example there of she needed to own it, right? So she didn't feel like it was timid, but they needed to also give her permission. I use that example too. It's like in high school, oftentimes the best kicker in the school is a soccer player, and for most of the season, the football players treat him like the soccer player. But when he kicks the field goal that gets him to the state championship, now he's a football player. Right?
Absolutely.
It's no longer like you're different. They go, we need you, and you're not. We need you here all season. So it's sometimes just that appreciation piece that you're validating, or that you guys have ingrained in your culture, that I think is really so critical. So Jim, any questions out there on chat that would be helpful to?
Yeah, you bet. One in particular, and let me say, if you're having trouble, some people having trouble getting into Chatwing to get their questions in. So you can use the Facebook page if you want to do that to get them in. That's facebook.com/groups/call-to-coach. Or you can live tweet those to me. I just use #CSFchat. We'll stay around for a few extra minutes just in case you wanted to get your questions in for Lisa. But Jess asked this question: in the spirit of partnerships, any insight on how to capitalize on strengths and relationships that are of the mentor-mentee pairing?
So that's a great question, because I think it is a collaborative relationship. A lot of people go into mentor-mentee type partnerships thinking that it's kind of a one-way street. I'm the mentee and I'm going to get all that I can from my mentor, but it is collaborative. There's got to be something that goes the other way. I think the important thing is at the beginning of that is if both individuals have strengths data, would be to really look at how that's going to drive the pace and the interaction, the actual process of the mentor-mentee relationship. So if the mentor, let's say, is one to drive deep and understand rationale and context behind answers, and yet the mentee just wants the answer. This happens a lot in mentor-mentee relationships. The mentee just wants to suck everything down from the mentor so that they can just get smart fast. But the mentor wants to focus on helping them learn and take on that capability and process. So it's it's understanding how that's going to play out, and then both of them playing the sort of deliberate role to make sure that happens. And also asking some very direct questions. If we're going to make this relationship work, be effective, and get what we need out of it, what do you need from me? How can I apply my best strengths to make this successful? And what can I expect from you in terms of your strengths that you'll apply to this process to make it the most successful?
Yeah, Lisa, I like that a lot. I think the other thing that I would add to it, and I think it just kind of builds on what you said, is specifically some advice for the mentor is to really individualize. I think something that Lisa just shared is that mentor really wants to help the person, and so if they can understand their strengths, the individual strengths, and lead from that lens, that's where it's really going to have its most impact. I think sometimes mentors are somebody, and even if it's assigned in an organization, it's somebody that's a little bit more seasoned. So it's somebody that's been with the company 20 years in sales, helping a brand new sales associate. And sometimes what that kind of new mentor can do is to say, well, what I did when I was in your shoes, and they're really just passing on advice that might work, but it may not. Again, if I'm high woo and say, well, I go out and network, and you're a high relator, and you really have the ability to go deep with individuals, you trying to be like me is not going to help you. And so that mentor individualizing, again, if they have individualization high, this will be pretty easy for them. But even if they don't, to individualize their approach, helping that person to kind of find their own way. And I think that's some of what you just said, Lisa, that if we can advise mentors to think that way as well, I think that's where there's going to be a lot of value.
Yeah, I think in that case, that mentor would have said, you need to build, if you're trying to help your mentee build an external network and they're not wooey, then saying, so let's talk about which of your top strengths you could apply to expanding your network and helping them think through what naturally comes to them.
Yeah,
and driving with that.
They sound more like a coach, but a coach who then has experience to say, the way I did it is I used this theme. So which of your themes can you use to accomplish this?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. That's good.
Very good. Guest 877 asks, what brings out the best of a team? And I hear this question a lot too. A team where most of them are sharing the same themes versus a team where the themes are varied.
So that's such an interesting question. My natural thought, sort of belief, is that a diverse team, a team with a lot of different strengths, is going to be a team that's going to have the least blind spots. They have lots of different views. They'll be able to think of wider and more creative kinds of solutions because everybody comes from a different viewpoint, and the variety of strengths will ensure that they don't miss anything. So that would be I think the best teams are the ones that have the greatest diversity. However, you can have teams that have a lot of the same thematic strength information, as long as they know where their gaps are and they seek out complementary partnerships from outside the team, then they can have the same kind of output. They don't have unmet blind spots.
Yeah, Pat, if you haven't read, to this listener, if you haven't read the book, 5 Dysfunctions of Team by Pat Lencioni, one of the things that he hits on in that book, which really builds to this quite well, is he says that basic dysfunction is a lack of trust, and the way to build trust is to understand and appreciate each other's strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's that piece that, Lisa, you were just hitting on, is, okay, we see each other's strengths, but are we aware of where do sometimes those get in the way of each other? Where do sometimes they annoy each other? And instead of me saying to the group, hey, how do I bother you? And now I hate everything you're telling me, is it almost the opportunity for me to say, hey guys, here are my weaknesses. Here's how this can sometimes get in the way. Not where it's an excuse. Like I've heard people say, sorry I'm always late to meetings, I'm just low responsibility. You're like, nah, that doesn't work, right?
Right.
But it's like where you can be vulnerable with it to say, hey, if I'm high communication, I have a tendency to think out loud or talk more than I listen. So interrupt me, or I'm gonna continue to work on that. That vulnerability does exactly that. That sharing strengths and weaknesses builds that level of trust within any team.
Yeah, great.
I've heard this a lot too, because my discipline is a little bit low, and so Jeremy, to your example, I can be late all the time, and I've had recently people say, let's find a theme that will help you with that, right? Just no excuses, just kind of, I'm maximizer's high for me, and so trying to use that maximizer theme to kind of keep me on schedule and keep me on time, and maybe looking at my schedule like a challenge in some regard, instead of it just being a series of meetings. It's like, how am I going to maximize my day to be able to get through? Because many of my days are booked from beginning to end. I mean, if people look at my calendar and they're like, how do you get anything else done during the day? And so for me, it's a little bit of a maximizer exercise to say, how do I maximize every single minute throughout the day? Now, that's tough with Woo to do that, right? The Woo takes over, and I want to talk to everybody in the process, but certainly not an excuse. I wanted to say in that Lisa, and I'm going to come back to you on this, with those themes where you have teams where themes are similar. We find our software, like our software developers here, all have similar domains. Those themes don't line up, but they're in very similar domains going forward. And so does it change when you have a group of people that are doing a specific task, or like you think software development requires those skill sets are very similar? Does the variety maybe disadvantage a team in a case where they're all working on something the same, where those strengths would benefit them? I don't know, just maybe some thoughts on what you've seen out in the field.
It's interesting because you get that a lot, like around technical teams, like software developers or research scientists, or areas where the belief is it's like this very a narrower, less variability in the work, more of a narrower focus, and everybody doing kind of like thing. But I think even any job like that has a lot of different aspects to it. And even though they're a software developer, to use your example, they still have to interact with people around scoping out what they're developing, around communicating milestones. There are people that have to do validation and quality type work, and so that's a lot of different kinds of talents and strengths coming to bear on that kind of work. And so I think if you can have some people on that team that can have more talents, let's say in the communications area, to be able to help that upfront piece when they're setting the scope and communicating milestones. If you've got some people that have the kind of some of the discipline that's needed to do some of the validation work. So you don't need a lot, but you need some of it, and that helps the overall process, even if the bulk of the players on that team have kind of similar domains.
Yeah, and I think we balance that with our project managers. If you look at their domains, they're often not in those areas, and so those individuals take those themes and use them to keep the others who are in the other domains kind of on track, if that's what's needed. Some of them are very, very focused, so
that's true.
It's a matter of communication and kind of how that works, but it's just always interesting to see those themes play out. We have 23 new interns on the campus here at Gallup for the summer, or the technology interns, and it's been fun. I'm reminded every single time when we bring them together, and all we've done is talk strengths for the last 3 weeks. Every time we sit down, I say, okay, tell me your top 5, right? One of those exercises to get people to recognize that they have them. I think that's a big key for organizations that are just taking on strengths, is to repeat those all the time, right? Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. And I know what we used to do in the early days was we used to take some of these strengths cards, the decks, and I think there was also a deck that was like kind of similarities of certain themes deck, and put them in places where employees would sit. Maybe they're sitting at a desk waiting for a manager to come. They're in conference rooms or at lunch tables, and when people have some downtime and have an opportunity, put those decks out and let just people play with them, because it really helps you get comfortable with the lexicon, helps you understand some of the nuances between and why certain things look the same but aren't really, or can look different in combination with other themes.
Yeah, I agree. Any way you can get it in front of them. It's just, as we have employees that have been here a long time, and you get kind of settled into that strengths discussion where you don't talk about it as much. And I just find as a manager, it's key that I bring that up intentionally in discussion all the time.
And if I could just also add, that was probably one of the places where we were very deliberate about every part of our development program incorporated some significant strengths focus, so that it was repeated whether or not you were in an individual a course for individual contributors, whether or not you were in a course for sales managers, whether we're in a management course or a leadership course, and there was a common building of knowledge and experience and confidence around strengths and strengths interplay from different lenses. A lot of focus initially on self and busting myths, and then as you got into managerial roles, really helping you understand how to apply it to teams and to customers. And so making, one of the great I think one of the great successful pieces for Stryker was ensuring that that was in every one of our developmental courses, and then it built on each other, and having that kind of a cohesive system where it was a common lexicon that went throughout. So it just became very natural and embedded and operationalized.
Yeah, I like that piece too, Lisa, and I think that's important for people out there who are, again, regardless of the size of their organization, but who have said we want to embed this as part of our culture. I think it's simply doing that last piece you said of really making it part of day in, day out. It wasn't just strengths was that event we did, or we learned about it, or even when people say, all right, I'm going to put my top 5 on my desk or my email. But the reason we say email, the reason we say use these team grids, or we now have some apps that are available, it's how do you make this a part of everyday conversations. And so even when there is tension with partnerships or teams, are we encouraging leaders to step back, right? Because it will happen. There will be tension.
Yes.
Do they step back to just say, what are our themes and what does that look like? So, Lisa, this is great. Tons of great insight, and really appreciate, like you said, we've had a lot of really good examples from coaches on individual and some team components, but not as much from the organizational lens. So I know there's a lot of additional insight you could dive into around this, but really appreciate that you joined us today. We'll have you hang around because there might be some questions we can come back to for post-show. But in regards to what's next, Jim, I'll kind of hit on this, and then you can, if there's anything else I missed or you want to hit on. Next week on Thursday, we'll be doing, again, Kurt Leesville. We'll be continuing our Theme Thursday series, individualization, which we talked about a little bit earlier, but that's going to be the theme that we hit on for that week. So if you own that one, want to know more about it, if it's one you aren't as familiar with, want to learn about, you can catch that next Thursday. And then 2 weeks from today, we'll be back here with a coach. Margaret Trilly is her name, and she is a financial advisor, actually the managing partner for Trillion Strategy Group, and works primarily, she's certified as a Gallup Strengths coach, and uses that in her role as an advisor, both as a family advisor, but also private wealth advisor. So working with wealthy families, their businesses, and integrating strengths into how they operate. So family businesses, I'm sure there's just as much tension, if not more, right, than we talked about in the workplace. But I know she's got a ton of great strategies and insights of ways that she's been able to use strengths, again, both in those scenarios and also thinking about people's financial futures. So that, again, will be in 2 weeks. We'll be back here with Margaret.
All right, very good, Jeremy. As we kind of bring this to a close, I'll remind individuals to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center. That's just GallupStrengthsCenter.com. And if you're in an organization, want to take advantage of that as well, we'd love to build a custom solution for you. If you have those questions around that, you can just send those to us, coaching@gallup.com. You can catch the recorded audio and video of this program as well as all the past ones. And like we said, we have a bunch for you, including a bunch of themes we've already done. Kurt and I have sat down and already cranked through about 5 of those themes. Love to have you view those as well. They're all available on our Facebook page. Really, the site you need to remember, coaching.gallup.com. All of our social resources are available out there for you as well. That'll wrap it for that will wrap it for this week's Called to Coach, and we'll be back again in a couple more weeks with, like Jeremy said, and we'd like to thank you. Stay around for the post show if you're listening live, and remember, you can't get the post show unless you come to the live show. Love to have you come out and do that as well. Goodbye, everybody.